question here. What is the difference between this mempool flooding and that previous one we discussed? Stress testing. So in stress testing also, I am injecting false transaction. Okay, and I am keeping my network in stress, and other honest transactions are suffering. So how these two transactions are different so generally this stress testing are performed by this is ethical. Whenever you are creating a block, perform an evaluation, at that time you are injecting more transaction and you are testing your system whether it is work when I am pushing this false transaction. And it is unethical mempool because this is done by attacker. This is not done by the tester. So this is used for testing the blockchain. Like when I am creating a block, I am keeping suppose 2000 blocks, 2000 transactions in one block, and I am checking that whether it is work fine or not. So it is used. What it is doing? We are testing. It is used during testing, and it is done by the attacker. Okay. It helps to improve scalability. It increases fee, slow down transaction. It is realistic and controlled, and it is spam and malicious. So both the spam mempool flooding attack and stress testing attack looks like similar, but stress testing are done by done when we are doing the performance evaluation, and it is done by the attacker. So next is selfish mining. So the selfish mining attack is a strategy which is opted by certain miners who attempt to increase their rewards by deliberately keeping their blocks private. So what is selfish mining? So this is a honest blockchain. Suppose here nodes are added in a honest blockchain. So all nodes are added. So what happened in selfish mining? So one attacker mined the block, but it will not broadcast that block to the network. Okay. So attacker mine the block. It is correct, valid block, but it is not broadcasting that block. And then again attacker valid another block and attach here. Here what happens? So in the meantime, when these two blocks created, another block newly blocked, validated and added to this honest blockchain. So in this case, when another block will be added, that block, it will see that this is the longest block chain and this is the smallest. So by default they will add here. So this is the selfish mining, means this block is validated before this block, but it is not broadcasted. So others are not known that it is this block exists. So when this block validated, it will attack to this block, and in the meantime the attacker validated two blocks and it is now the bigger chain than this chain. So this is selfish mining. So increase their reward by deliberately keeping their blocks private. So block without withholding attack. After this you will read every 2-3 attacks you will read yourself. I will discuss only these two. So next is block withholding attack. What is block withholding attack? Malicious nodes can intentionally mask, forge or withhold important information that needs to be relayed across the network. Some of the known attacks of these are classical block withholding attack, fork after withholding attack. So what is this classical block withholding attack? So in basic block withholding attack, a miner joins a mining pool, but upon discovering a valid block, withhold it instead of submitting it, as I told you in selfish mining type of. This comes under that. The miners still submit partial proof of work to earn reward from the pool without contributing valid blocks. This results in reduced profitability for the pool while the attacker still earns from the reward system. Another is fork after withholding. The attacker mines a valid block but does not submit it right away, and if the attacker mines another block, they release both the blocks together, increasing their reward. This strategy also allow the attacker to gain more control over the blockchain. That in this way 51% attack also will happen. So next is suppose classical, that I discussed this previous. So this example I will discuss here now. So here what happened? This is Bitcoin network, and here the block withholding attack is launched against the decentralized mining pool. So it is a mining pool. This mining pool consists of good miners and this bad miner. Similarly, this mining pool consists of these two miners. Okay. So a compromised miner in the pool finds the proof of work. So suppose this is the compromised miner. This mining pool is saying that I am the miner of this mining pool. Okay, this is attacker actually. And what happened? And chooses not to disclose it. Unaware of the compromised miner, the rest of the miners in the pool reading will not get. So what happened? This is the malicious attacker, and this malicious attacker is saying that I am a miner of this mining pool. Okay. So what happened? Among this mining pool, this miner is a malicious attacker. This miner solves the proof of work puzzle, but withhold it. It will not disclose that I have solved the puzzle. If it will disclose that I have solved the puzzle, then it will get reward from this mining pool. But in the same way, in this mining pool, other miners are also joined. They are also wasting their resources by solving the proof of work. In this way, these miners will be attacked. Okay. So this is one block withholding attack. And fork is a malicious miner joins two mining pool. Here you will see the malicious user join one mining pool, and fork is a malicious user joins two mining pools, suppose MPA and MPB respectively. The miner computes a valid proof of work in the mining pool of MPA. He withholds the solution and only publishes the block once MPB also publishes the block. So that means, because this miner joined both the pool, this pool and this pool, so whether this pool is giving reward or this pool is giving reward, he will get reward. Okay, because the miner joined this pool as well as the miner joined this pool. So when it displays that it's false, this miner will get the reward, but because it is unnecessarily joining this mining pool and creating congestion. Okay. So the miner he withholds the solution and only publishes the block once the MPB also publishes. The network selects one block among the two. The malicious miner gets reward either way. Either it can get the reward from this pool or get the reward from that pool. Then next, I think you read yourself. Yes or no? This I already discussed. 51% attack also discussed. Forking attack I discussed all. Then other 2, 3 you read yourself. Time jacking attack and crypto jacking, wallet theft. This you read yourself. Blockchain application. Okay. Double spending I can discuss. Okay. 1. This is known. That's why I am discussing this. Okay. So in double spending attack carried out by user A. So what user A has done? Double spending मतलब क्या है? What is the meaning of double spending?
Spending twice the amount. Spending twice the amount.
Spending twice the amount.
Spending the same thing 2 times.
Twice. Spending the same
transaction
coin for 2 different work. Yes or no? That is double spending. So what this user will do? User will has done one transaction 2 here with this user, and before submitting it, this user is again spending this transaction with user C. User C is unnecessarily paying money, and when this it is sending to this pool, first it will check, validate all the transaction 2, transaction 3, transaction 4. Transaction 3 is a double spending. So this user C wasted his computing resources. Yes or no? Full proof of work. These 2, 4 and 5 are valid transactions, so it will be added to the block, created a block and added. So this user double spent the money for transaction 2 and transaction 3. Okay. So this is double spending. So with this, thank you all. Yeah, others you read from the slide. Okay.
Now, is double spending like with the user's consent, like, or without knowing him.
Without knowing.
Like there's been double spending held here. So is that double spending known to the user, or like without his consent or without his permission the double is being spent?
Means?
Like user C is not aware of the double spending.
But-
But user A is already means he is knowingly aware. He's knowingly,
Attacker.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. It's attackers.
The user B or C, whatever I saw, that is the
User-
attacker. The
User is
attacker
malicious.
is saying that attacker, the users are unknown, but the attacker is spending same coin for two things. Okay, that is double spending. Okay, thank you all.
Is that you are interacting with external sources, so there should be a mechanism to take inputs, external inputs, and write it on the chain, and that's why we rely on blockchains. No, sorry, we rely on decentralized oracles. So it's not just for, it's not only for the transactions that type of transactions that we saw, but accountability in the blockchains could be for various reasons. And
Before slide I have one
yeah,
question. In the buyer can be order cash on delivery.
Yeah.
How it's process going on? How the process?
It is on chain.
The smart contract buyer can cash on delivery happening. Not money will send the smart contract. How is product process going on? This smart contract.
okay, so that's a different model. In most cases, you might not have that support. So this is where you have to pay in advance to get the thing.
Actually, how the process going on in the cash on delivery means.
Oh, cash on delivery means once you give the product, you get the money. So it's like,
What if
The smart contract, how it's work, the cash on delivery.
okay, so that is what I'm saying. Not for all applications would you need a blockchain.
Yeah. In like Amazon, Flipkart don't have a smart contract. No?
Yeah.
Smart contract.
They don't have,
Yeah, okay.
They have online payments too.
yeah, online payments too. So, okay, let me make a few things clear. So whatever we are talking at this point of time, it need not, you might not have seen things already happening with this sort of a model. Because no one is thinking, generally we would like to resolve disputes, as we were talking in the morning. We would like to resolve disputes in a different way. What I'm trying to say here is that this is a different model, and this could also work, and this would work for the reasons as I mentioned. Without relying on the court, you are essentially relying on a trusted third party, because court is also a trusted party, right? You trust the court. So here you are trusting the blockchain. So it is just trying to give you a feeling why in the first place you will use blockchain. So that is why this is an example that we started with. Is that clear?
Okay.
So not all applications can be moved to this blockchain, and I'll show you today some examples where you will not require blockchain. I mean, it's just a overhead. Okay. So think of this problem again. So you have a client, and you have some cloud or some server where you are doing some computation. So in that model, the client essentially tries to, either you can think of your data being stored on some database, some cloud database or some external server, or you want to do some computing on that data. So for example, think that you have a lot of scientific computation to be performed, it cannot happen in your local machine, so you are essentially outsourcing that information. So mostly the cloud service providers, they provide both storage and compute, right? And you could think of this as a model. Now, one thing is, one of the things that this accountability, to ensure accountability in presence of a dishonest client and a dishonest server, you could do the same thing as before. So what you would like to do is simple thing. You want to submit a task and the data associated on which you want to do the task. So think of a computation that you want to perform on the data. So you send the data as well as the type of computation you want to perform on the server. And what you would do, you would like the server to give you a result, right? But what is the guarantee that the server is going to return you the right result? So typically we assume that the server is honest, the server is doing all the computation correctly, but that is our assumption, right? If there's something incorrect, we will not be able to figure out because we are not doing it. We are not doing the computing on our own, local machines. So whatever result we are getting, we have to rely on that. And think about, all the machine learning algorithms that are running to give you all sorts of fancy things and useful things. You have no clue what sort of data they are training on, and whether it's your data they are training on or they are taking help of other data and so on. And there are a lot of attacks that have been, a lot of cases where it has been shown that they are essentially taking data from various other sources and training the models, which is not a very good practice, and many of the companies could be fined for using data sources which they have not taken permission from. So all these questions are real. I mean, at this point you might be thinking, oh, why am I thinking about this? As long as I get my model and I get a good, my AI is giving me something nice, why do I care? We do care, because think about this particular thing, that in order to generate some insights, it is training on a large set of data. Say for example, pictures or documents. Now many of these documents could have copyrights on them. What does it mean? It means that it is a piece of creative art where people have copyrighted it. Now if the machine, if the training is happening on those as well, where we do not have right to, then it is violating the regulatory the regulations. So that's essentially liable to be challenged in the court. And a lot of companies, they pay heavy fines because they are not complying with the regulations that are that they should go about. So this accountability is very important thing, and you have to make sure that the server is essentially working on this data and the same task, and doing the correct task. Now, as we talked yesterday, in the morning, that you keep some evidence of the data. When will you keep the evidence? When will you put the evidence on the server, on the smart contract? Will it be after you send the data or before you send the data? After. Okay. So the client also says, this is my data, this is my task. Okay, it sends it to the server. Okay, then it puts an evidence of some other data, some other thing on the blockchain. What will happen? It can be false. So it has to do together. So essentially, when the client sends the data to the server, at that point of time, the server, the evidence of whatever data is being sent should be maintained on the blockchain, and it should be done in a way that the server can also see, right, what is being written, so that it knows that whether it is consistent with what I received or not. You see what I'm trying to say? So this would add more transparency to the whole system, for which blockchain is very useful. So you write the data on the chain and the same data should be submitted, and if there is any dispute here, it is resolved very quickly. Okay, you're not waiting till the last minute. Okay, so the evidence is written at the at the start. It's not like when I'm putting when I have a dispute, then I bring in some evidence. No, that's the model we do for courts. But here, it is at the time when the client is submitting. It is also sending some kind of a it could be evidence, could be in the form of some hash digest. It could be something else, but some digest or some information is kept, evidence is kept on the chain, which also means, and this is where you are committing this on the chain, meaning that you cannot say later, this is what I didn't do this, right? So that is the main thing. And this aspect, that when I'm committing something, I can commit to different things and later I cannot deny. So that's the main thing. And the blockchains, you have to keep some evidence. When I'm saying keep some evidence, you have to commit something here. And it should be consistent with whatever you are submitting. This is a very important thing to really understand, because the success or the correctness of all these blockchain operations which rely on this order of these tasks or what order of these individual operations. Is this clear? Okay.
Is the data that the client is submitting in the smart contract only verifiable by the server, or other nodes can also verify?
Anyone. So whenever you are writing a digest of this, the digest on the chain, or some evidence on the chain, this chain is a permissionless chain. It is open to all, so anyone can see. Now what can happen is that this could be a some secure channel, and the data that the client sending to the server might be encrypted, or it might be put on a secure channel where others might not be able to see this data, to be able to say that this data is consistent with this evidence over here. But the server can see this is my data, and it can essentially verify with the digest.
How when the client sent to the server, how can the other nodes verify the data matching up to the data?
So they are not verifying at this time. It is like when it is writing the first evidence, it is in agreement with the server.
The server, that the data that the server is receiving, it should also be on the blockchain. Like you compare both the data and the other nodes.
That is also possible. That is also possible. Here we are not writing any data, because we are not storing the data, and the only reason we are not storing data is because it will be very heavy, and it's going to be more cumbersome. Okay, so this is one thing to keep in mind. And then when you are returning the result of a computation, you actually give a proof that is publicly verifiable, saying that yes, this is my correct computational results. And this proof is again a snark proof that we were talking about earlier. But at this point, what I'm trying to say is that once the server has completed the task, it is also to prove that it has completed it successfully, correctly, not successfully, I would say correctly. So this is some kind of a proof that the blockchain, that the server gives, and which is written on the blockchain, which can later serve as evidence, in case of disputes. And the smart contract essentially sees that, essentially is able to verify whether this proof is a correct proof or not. Yeah. So I mean, all these things need access to external data. So for example, data, we are saying that data is not written on the blockchain, right? So there should be a mechanism to interact with the external data and what is written on the blockchain, and that is where the Oracle comes into picture, as we talked in the morning. So essentially, think about the inputs and outputs, and this is the blockchain. So the oracles, would be interfacing with the inputs and also the outputs. So you will take the help of the oracles to take some data input, some external input, and put it on blockchain. So this is why you need oracles. But think about it. If you have an oracle here, maybe I have a picture of this. Yeah, think about this. So think of all the real world events and data, and then you have an oracle here, and it is connecting with the blockchain. Suppose, who is now an oracle? Who is an oracle? What is an oracle?
Which knows data about everything. Which knows everything.
Yeah, so so that's the meaning. But what is an oracle? Oracle could be a server which is taking the data and putting on the blockchain in some form.
The client.
If there is only one oracle, what will happen? One oracle sitting in a server, centralized. So if there's only one oracle which is taking the data and feeding it into the blockchain, it can go corrupt, and it can put in false data, right? And that is why it's very important that you have this in the oracle to be decentralized. And that's why we are keeping on we keep on talking about decentralized oracles. We don't want oracles to be centralized, because centralized means central point of failure, and it could have malicious intent, it could inject false information, or it might simply delete information. So centralized versus decentralized. Centralized oracles are single point of failure, can be malicious or faulty. It could also be faulty, right? In that case, data is not fed into the blockchain. Decentralized oracles are robust and must prevent data manipulation, inaccuracy, and downtime. So these are some of the properties it should have. The decentralized oracles should prevent data manipulation. Now, we are not telling you how at this point of time, but these are the properties that they should have. They should not manipulate the data, they should not give inaccurate data, and they should not be slow. Okay, so it should be quite seamless. It should be in real time as much as possible to interact with the blockchain. Okay. Is this clear? Yeah. Okay.
You were saying that Oracle is taking the data and is putting on the blockchain, but blockchain also has honest nodes, right? So if the data is wrong, the honest nodes will verify the data and say it is wrong.
Yeah.
So why is it that it has a simple point of failure in the Oracle itself?
Yeah. So it is because the nodes in the blockchain are not being able to interact with externally. That's why we are taking into consideration the Oracle. If the nodes are able to interact externally, then the Oracle is not needed at all.
So
They themselves can verify.
basically all the oracles, they are verifying the data, external data that is coming.
Yeah.
And then the data processing is verifiable by the nodes.
Yeah. But the blockchain, the oracles can do much more than just connecting, that we will talk. So the decentralized oracles are designed to enhance and extend the capabilities of smart contracts on a target blockchain, because such functions might not be available to the main blockchain. So this is what you would be, it is important to keep this in mind. And there are some basic resources that you provide. One of it is networking, storage, and compute. So for example, so we'll go with each of these, and we'll see how these oracles provide all these services. So it is not only connecting with the outside world, but it is also doing some storage. It can also do some computation. And what sort of computation? Sometimes, with this main blockchain, which is computing, there's a lot of computational tasks that the blockchain has to perform. Now, sometimes it can be extremely computation intensive. In those cases, it could be outsourced to the Oracle, and it can actually compute on behalf of the smart contract. Does that make sense? So the smart contract does computation in general, right? I mean, it can, execute a piece of code. Sometimes it could be that it is essentially quite heavy code, so it could outsource it to the Oracle. So oracles can also do some computation. So they should have the following properties: confidentiality, integrity, and availability properties. So strong confidentiality means that the data should not be, so they should be, if they are computing on the data, they should not be aware of this computation, because sometimes it could happen that this information is quite sensitive and you don't want to reveal this data. And so the confidentiality is important, integrity, so the data should not be tampered with when it is communicated through the Oracle, and data should be available. I mean, it should be the Oracle should be available to handle all the requests that are coming from the external source. Okay, so by the way, all these I will put two resources. One of them is the paper by Chainlink. Chainlink is one of the most popular oracles, and they also have a very nice, there are nice blogs. So most of these things are taken from these two things. So it might be a little bit biased, but there are some other resources that I put at the end, so that there's it is not. You do have flavors. You see what others are also doing. Okay, so for the example, this is from the blog. Okay, so what are the things that oracles can provide? So oracles can do some price or data. They can be price or data aggregators. So it's very important. I mean, these oracles have been extensively used in decentralized finance applications. So for example, some of these would be, some of these could be, you are accessing some loan and you want to make sure that you understand, you have the credit history and everything of that particular individual. So, really to make sure that you have all the available data and able to make a decision whether the loan will be granted or not. This is something that oracles are used for, and then there are various other DeFi mechanisms that these oracles also support. So these are some of the examples of some of the examples that you will see. So these are the crypto exchanges. We talked about exchanges couple of when we were talking about consensus, right? So some of these exchanges, for example, Binance, Coinbase, we saw actually something. We were talking about Coinbase, I believe, Kraken, Uniswap, Sushi, etc. And then you would have other organizations who are supporting these aggregators, and similarly there are some node operators. I'm going to talk about the network aggregation and node operators in a bit.
And are these oracles that are putting the information on the cryptocurrency blockchains? So what type of information are they putting?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Okay. So, what type of information and some of the use cases are going to come. But before that, let me just tell you one thing. There's again this on-chain and off-chain concept of on-chain and off-chain. Yesterday we saw, right, off-chain transactions, on-chain transactions. Same over here. On-chain data is the one that you have seen already. The account data, balances, smart contracts, all these are on-chain. Smart contracts are run on-chain, right? So all these data are on the chain or written on the blockchain. Off-chain data could be, sensor data, weather data that you are getting from other sources. It could be identity data that you get from your credentials or domain names. And then you have financial data. So all these are external data that could be fed on the blockchain. and the Oracle helps to take in this off-chain data and able to integrate or able to feed it into the smart contracts. So these are some of the types of oracles that are widely used. The first and second are very simple. So the first one essentially fetching external data, and the output oracles are sending the data from smart contract outside system. So the input oracles fetches external data, for example, price feeds, sensor data, and so on. And then the output oracles, say for example, after a computation, you would like to say, okay, I have finished the computation, now turn on the machine. So that is when you are essentially sending the command to an external device. So that is where you use the output oracles. And so making a payment, say for example, you have executed a smart contract, you have maybe executed a will, and then you have made the payment in certain, you have made the payment not in the blockchain, but actual real banks or bank accounts. Okay, and then you could have cross-chain oracles. So I have not mentioned this term, or maybe I did yesterday when we were talking of interoperability. But cross-chain essentially means you have two blockchains and you are talking to one another. What does it mean? Say for example, you have a Ethereum blockchain and you have a Bitcoin blockchain, and you are interacting with one another, meaning that they could be doing many things. First thing is that you are converting Ethereum to Bitcoin or Bitcoin to Ethereum. That's where you are doing a cross-chain communication, or you are writing some information from one one blockchain to the other. So for example, you want to do an asset exchange or something from Bitcoin to some Ethereum to Ethereum blockchain. In that case, read or write information across the blockchains can be done using an oracle. There are other mechanisms as well, but oracles are kind of loosely speaking, and I believe that some places people also compare it with a bridge kind of a thing between two chains. And there are many overlapping concepts that we have seen in yesterday and this. That's why even though your schedule had oracles first and scalability later, I thought it would be good to have scalability first and oracles later. The only reason being that this oracles, they borrow a few concepts that we have seen before. Okay, and then you have the compute enabled oracles. So for example, they perform secure off-chain computation. Say for example, today we were talking of generating zero knowledge proofs or proofs in the morning. These proofs are extremely computation intensive. It's not easy to generate these proofs. So one thing that oracles could do is generate the proof and give it back to the blockchain. So this sort of computation where the smart contract is executing the computation, it could be quite heavy computation that the smart contract is doing. At that time, you can talk back to the oracles and outsource the computation on the oracles. Because the reason is pretty simple. The blockchain is being run by many peers and so on, and it often gets very much delayed. So everyone has to run that computation, right? Whichever node is running the contract is running the computation, right? Instead, you are outsourcing it on the oracles, but you have to ensure that whatever computation the oracle is doing is correct, and you're not and nothing, and it is not an incorrect computation. Now there could be privacy questions on you might be asking privacy, you would have privacy problems. Say for example, you're computing on the data, which is a very sensitive data. In that case, you have to do some privacy preserving computing which is extremely expensive, and that you can outsource to these oracles and do it much faster than what you would have done on chain. So this is again another use or another way of using the oracles. So oracles can be used for various purposes. So initially when the oracles were proposed, they were only like input output. Now they have they can do all sorts of things. Questions, anyone?
How are oracles in the context of cryptocurrency blockchains? How are they? I am able to connect the compute-enabled oracles with them. As you said, they verify the ZKB proofs. But how are other input and output oracles in the context of?
Yeah, as I said, one of the good example is price feeds. Price feeds means like, there's the price of something that you are feeding onto the blockchain. So it could be like a price of say a stock, for example. You would like to know how it is changing, what is happening, and so on, and that could essentially be used for some other purpose, for some other application. So getting the right price feed is very important.
But on the considering Bitcoin or Ethereum, are there any input and output oracles connected with them?
Yeah, sensor, for example. So you are say for example you are doing you have a sprinkler, okay, and you want to make sure that the sprinkler is on when the moisture.
This is an IoT application, right? This
Yeah.
is in the context of agriculture.
Yeah.
I'm asking if this is a cryptocurrency application.
Cryptocurrency application. So, for example, cryptocurrency application. So, what a cryptocurrency is doing?
Like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah.
Are there any input and output oracles integrated with them, or are there any big companies?
No. So, for example, say Chainlink or some other company, they are essentially integrated with the Ethereum. So, the underlying chain could be any chain. It's agnostic of the blockchain.
What
So-
is Chainlink doing?
So Chainlink is the oracle. So it has like input. It can take input, output. It has all these features. It can do some compute. It's a decentralized oracle. Yeah. Any other questions? This time of the day is very tricky. So interaction, how the oracles interact is they interact with the smart contracts on the blockchains. So for example, there could be several types of services that they can provide. They could be, off-chain data they are feeding into the smart contract. It could be there are cross-chain swaps that can happen, cross-chain data. There could also be compute operation that the smart contract has outsourced to the oracle. So there could be, different oracles that would provide different types of services depending upon, depending upon what type of blockchain it is they are interacting with and what type of service is required. Okay, so how are these done? How are these the blockchain oracle interactions take place? Oh my gosh, this is gone on this side. There's a block over here which essentially says this is a blockchain, but somehow this is not quite reflected on this side. So it essentially is a blockchain over here. Just take it that way. Now there's a blockchain, and so this is an the decentralized oracle network. It has a module that would execute transactions or execute certain functions or certain operations, and it has a storage module which can actually store data. So these adapters are actually interfaces with the external world or the blockchain. So this adapter is adapter is interacting with the oracle and between the oracle and the blockchain. So essentially, it is taking inputs that has been executed here and feeding it on the chain. So this is an interface. And similarly, there are two interfaces that are taking data from the some web server, and then these are feeding into the oracle. And it could be the other way around as well. Like it could also feed back something else. So it's not just a one-way arrow, it would be like a two-way thing. But note that there is an execution module. This is an important thing. It's not just input and output, it's also execution. So earlier, oracles were not so much used for execution, but now oracles provide a lot more functionalities, and that's why these executable things are also there. Okay, so this is essentially interacting with the smart contract on the blockchain. So this part, the smart contract and this executable module, they together form what is called a hybrid smart contract. So earlier what we have seen that the smart contract is running on the blockchain, right? It's completely on the blockchain. But now with the Oracle has this executable component and the smart contract, and together it is called a hybrid smart contract. So essentially something is happening on chain and something is happening off chain. This is off chain. Oracle is off chain. This is on chain, where your actual smart contract is executed. Does this make sense? Yeah. Okay, let us take an example. Say, for example, in this case, you could think of this, the main chain, this has a smart contract, and then you have the contract state of the contract. What are the inputs, what is the output that are written on chain? So all this information is done on the chain. Question? So this is all written, this is all a part of the main chain. And here is a decentralized oracle. The decentralized oracles, they get some reports. So this is from the external entity. And the smart contract, as I said, is a hybrid contract. So there's a contract state on the decentralized oracle as well, because it's together. This is a contract, is essentially the hybrid contract is running on the chain and inside the oracle. So it's a hybrid contract. So there is some interaction between the oracle and the smart contract, which can help, to sync updates. It can, it can do partial computation on the server, so on the decentralized oracle. So as I said, one example is that if you are doing heavy computation, you are outsourcing this computation, and then whatever is happening here, it has to sync with the smart contract. And there are some smart contract transactions that are happening, and these are kept in mempools. So essentially, from the mempools, you could also interact with the decentralized oracle. So you can take this transactions partially. You can partially do things on the decentralized oracle, and you can also do it on the smart contract. And because of this reason, you would see that both of them are working together. So it is not all the computation is being done on the smart contract. Some of it is also done on the decentralized oracle. What does it remind you of from the last couple of classes? Do you see some similarity with something? Yeah. So it's similar in flavor to layer 2s. You see, the layer 2, we were actually outsourcing things off chain. We're doing things, then we are ready. There's a very thin line of, which between this oracles and these layer 2s. And I would say that for the compute side of things, it is like, it is a smart contract who is delegating it to the, so okay, there are two differences I would say. So with the layer 2s, it is up to the user who is essentially saying, okay, go do this computing on the, it's choosing that that layer 2 application to do the computing, and everything is done there. On the other hand, it could be that the smart contract itself is delegating something over here. So this is a subtle difference between the layer 2s and the decentralized oracles, and many of the layer 2s interact very closely with the decentralized oracles. Why do they do it? So think of the layer 2, because layer 2 does a lot of these computing. As we said in the morning, it was taking all these transactions, bundling up, then proving something, and so on. And if I have a layer 2 which is not powerful enough, I might also delegate this to the oracle and let the oracle do it in a way that is privacy preserving, and also all sorts of things. You can get all sorts of guarantees. It is fast. I don't have the layer 2 can be again big, quite large, and it can interact with the decentralized oracles in that way. Now if you look very closely at it, many of you will ask me this question: you're just adding one layer after another, one layer after another. Does it really make sense? Does it? Yeah, so that's why these decentralized oracles should actually have important and interesting properties that the other layers are not providing. Yeah, so for example, they should support privacy preserving computing, meaning that I don't know what data is being fed to me, but I am being able to compute on the encrypted data. So this is one of the things most of the good decentralized oracles, they are able to do privacy preserving computing on for various applications. So this is one of the, for example, properties that decentralized oracles should, or services decentralized oracles should provide. But I would still tell you, think about this thing. Like, are we really adding layers, or is it really important? Yeah, think. And because someone came with the oracle does not mean you cannot come up with something which is a better model. Or there could be ways to improve the oracles, or have more features, nice features in the oracles. Okay. Look into some of the applications. So, for example, price feeds, sensor, weather reports, sensors for agricultural purposes. So these three are very much IoT applications. Sensors in the car that can sense different things, and you can figure out, or you can keep a track of different activities that the car has gone through. So, for example, you can keep track of the behavior of the driver, or the how the car went. Say, for example, when was it speeding? When was it how did it pick up the speed? Were there any so these sort of things, and these are quite useful. Say, for example, there has been an accident, so you look into the history, or the what happened exactly prior to that, and you try to predict whether this accident, what was the reason of the accident. If it was like a very rash driving from the user's perspective, so you are essentially doing a kind of a forensic analysis by looking into the data that you have got. And having this blockchain would essentially help you to keep track of different things, and be able to come up with something more quickly, or efficiently. Similarly, sensors on your body, be it a smartwatch, or maybe it is some reading, some devices that are on your body that are measuring different body conditions. These can be integrated with the blockchain to really know how different things are changing over time. Okay. Any questions here? Some of the use cases, as I mentioned, decentralized oracles are used heavily in DeFi. Gaming, this is a very interesting thing. Okay, the oracles can generate sources of randomness and verifiable randomness, not just randomness, verifiable randomness. What does a verifiable randomness mean? Say, for example, you have a lottery, okay? You have a lottery, the lottery output should be random, right? Whoever gets the lottery is like a random thing. But how would you make sure that whatever lottery was designed was correctly designed? It did not have any bias or anything. Okay? So in those cases, you would need to be able to show or verify that the randomness that was produced at the time of the design of the lottery is actually random. It's not like biased. It is not biased. So these verifiable randomness is very important in lotteries. It is helpful when you are creating very engaging and unpredictable gameplay experiences. So these are very important. These are also important, when you have to select nodes in a say, for example, in your consensus algorithms, we said the leaders could be chosen at random. In those cases also, these verifiable randomness is very important. It means that not only I know that not only is the leader or the block proposer chosen at random, I can prove that it was a random choice. So I'm saying this word prove, verifiable in a very loose way, but this is the crux of things. The blockchain, this technology essentially gives that guarantee that I can prove things after it has happened. This is a very subtle concept that I want you to take back. Blockchains have this verifiability property. It can verify different things. Whether it be a transaction, or it is an action, it is a computation, you should be able to verify. And verifiability in general, it's a very big part of it's a very important thing, because you should be able to figure out that all the actions that are supposed to be taken are done in the correct way. The verifiability is in one way this, but there are also verification of anything is more formal verification and all. These are very nice. There's lots actually that's happening, and lot has been happening throughout. For various things, and to be able to formally show that everything is working correctly is very important. Whether you do it with cryptography or formal verification techniques will depend upon the context, but this is really important to have. Else I'm making just claims. I have done this. Yeah? Okay, so that's the thing. Yeah.
Like you said, it is a leader, and is that through a API connected to Oracle selecting the...
No, Ethereum does not do it that way. With Ethereum, they essentially have those using this Ghost protocol that we talked about yesterday, and then you have the the proof of stake type of protocol for having that committee, and within that committee you would have the verification of that block by that committee. Ethereum, no. Ethereum does not have any.
But how is the randomness verifiable? Oracle that is an external company providing the randomness that is verifiable by the user?
There are certain functions called the verifiable random functions. So the oracles run those functions. I can discuss these more, in depth, but I think this is really not. I mean, we can talk about this because this is also a very fascinating thing. It's used in many consensus algorithms as well. So, Algorand, for example, it uses a verifiable random function. Okay. So this insurance, very mistake. Insurance claims. So for example, you are making an insurance claim on some automotive, something, and then you are taking the sensor data and seeing whether really what was the cause of the accident. So all these things are really needed. So for example, you want to figure out what happened at some particular time. You can take the satellite data to see, okay, fine, whether it's really happened or not. Yeah, so these are quite compelling cases of oracles. Maybe I should talk about this one because this is also quite interesting. Sustainability. So sustainability essentially means that you have environment friendliness, and not only environment friendliness, you have like sustainable practices that are taking place. Oracles have played a big role in trying to estimate carbon footprints. And let me give an example. Say, think of a factory. They're doing a lot of processes. They're running a lot of processes. Think of a big organization such as a Google, Amazon, who are running big data centers and so on. So they are also generating a lot of carbon, right? GPU is melting. Yeah, so they are generating a lot of carbon. Now you have to estimate the carbon. Why? Because all companies, they have their own, they have to say like how sustainable their companies are, and they have to give good estimates of what is exactly happening. So you would need sensors that can say what are the processes that are running, and not only that, from all these processes you should be able to estimate the amount of carbon that is generated. Now, how these estimations are done, it is beyond my scope. It would be, people who are actually doing these things. But there would be like formula which would say like, okay, fine, if this sensor is measuring, there would be some mechanism to see that how much, from the reading in the sensor, how much carbon is generated. But how it fits into the oracles is that now you can get all these sensor data and run things on your smart contract to figure out how much carbon has been, how to estimate carbon. Not only this, you can also use these oracles to do monitoring, verification, and reporting of carbon credits. So let me tell you this, because this is a project that one of my undergrad students are doing, is doing. So she's looking into what we call, looking into this problem of carbon credits. So I'll explain the scenario. So typically, as I said, there are organizations who are generating a lot of carbon. Okay. Now, what are we doing with this carbon? Carbon they are generating because they have to do an offset, meaning that they should be investing in certain products which are also abating carbon. Means they are, say, an afforestation project. An afforestation would decrease the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, right? Because they will grow trees and so on. Or you are using, say, solar energy or wind energy, which are sustainable alternatives to other types of fuel. So all these things are, there's something called a voluntary carbon market, where you could have different projects. So for example, I can have an EV project. I will go and say, look, I'm going to reduce carbon, I'm going to offset the carbon, and for this project I'm going to do this and this. So one of the first steps is that you are able to, you have to decide how you are going to estimate carbon and so on. But not only that, what you have to show is that your EV will be effective enough to reduce the carbon footprint by such and such amount, because it is a sustainable, environment friendly way of doing things. So you have to do this reporting, monitoring and reporting, verification, monitoring, reporting and verification, meaning that my EV, I will check at real time how much it has traveled, and so on, to make sure that okay, it has traveled enough, if I were to travel by car or something, I would have generated this much carbon, but I'm essentially using an EV which is actually reducing whatever I would have done in this period of time. So all these this EVs would technically have sensors which would actually measure what distance they have traveled and so on, in order to be able to figure out how much carbon, carbon offset is done. So this essentially is an example where oracles could be used, because they are the sensors, those are collecting this data, but again, they're putting it on blockchain using these oracles. So this is one of the very nice, interesting use case that I have been seeing for some time. The different industries are using this because everyone has to give a sustainability report about their companies, what they are doing and how they are taking care of the environment. Okay, and then we also have enterprises having cross-chain oracles that can connect with different blockchains in the network. Okay, any questions here? Questions? If not, then here are some examples of decentralized oracles, oracle services that you will have, and that's it. Okay, I think I don't have the links to the two things, but I will put the link when I'm sharing it. There are some good surveys, I'll put them, but I like the white paper that Chainlink has. It has a lot of interesting questions out there, which are really nice. I can get a good feel of this thing. It also says how it is related to layer 2s and so on. And some of these layer 2s are also taking help of these decentralized oracles. So that's actually a good to see. Okay, so with that, let's stop here, take a break, come back in maybe 10 minutes, and we will talk about when and when not to use blockchains. So this will be more of a, you will be talking, I will be listening. So we'll talk about certain scenarios and let you decide whether it's good to have a blockchain. Okay, so let's come back at
3:30.
Of just discussing amongst us, just discussing this particular thing. So there's not much slides or anything over here. It's just give you some scenarios, and you will be discussing whether you think blockchain is really applicable in those settings. Okay, so the example that we saw in the morning, the same example of a book. Now I'm changing this setting a little bit. So what I'm telling now is that the seller is always an honest person. Okay, and buyer can be honest, can be dishonest, we don't know. Seller is always honest. Buyer could be honest or dishonest. So I've changed the setting a little bit. In the morning I said that seller can also cheat. Buyer can also cheat. Do you need a blockchain?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes and no. Tell me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how many of you are say yes? Okay. Okay, no. How many of you say no? Okay, one. Okay, tell me. Why no?
Ma'am, because the seller does not have to lock in any money. We don't have that lock-in mechanism that if the book doesn't get received by the buyer, then it's so like the seller would always send it. So there is that initial two-way locking won't be required, like we discussed.
Yeah, two-way locking is not required, but why will blockchain not be required? Okay, for those who said you think, well, you all tell me why blockchain is required. Can I? Yeah, blockchain. Why blockchain is required? And you will think how I can do without a blockchain. Why blockchain is required? Why? Because you said our blockchain is required. How will you? Yeah.
Seller should know about the buyer's name. Honest or dishonest?
So this is an honest seller. She will never cheat.
Okay.
She will never cheat.
She doesn't know about the buyer, right?
She doesn't know. Buyer can cheat.
That's why we need blockchain.
That's why we need blockchain. Can we do without it? Okay, think. If it is maybe, if your answer is yes to maybe, then you will think. And in this case, you are free to talk amongst yourselves. It's not like you are telling me. I really wanted to have it in a way where we could have small tables to discuss, but it's not possible in this class. So I don't know. Maybe turn around. Maybe you turn around or maybe I don't know how you would. Maybe those two rows can turn around and you can discuss. You guys can turn around. And you can discuss and can come up with something. Do you still read a blockchain? You will change your answer?
Yes, sir.
You need.
Blockchain.
Yeah, why?
Ma'am, if buyer can till after bought the book, he may say I can't receive the book. If it is maybe cash on delivery.
No cash on delivery. That's a normal thing. There's no cash on delivery.
The buyer and seller both are the
Honest
person.
No, buyer is not honest. Oh, okay, no. It can be honest reference. Yeah, it's both honest. Then
Honest means if you are don't have
don't need a blockchain.
okay, first question. If both are honest, do you need a blockchain?
No.
Like we need a blockchain just to like
need to save the transaction.
Okay, just to record the transaction, not for any other thing, right? Both are honest.
Yes.
Both are honest. You
either
don't
of them are dishonest. Like any one of the blockchain is necessarily needed.
necessarily. Why?
Just to like record the transaction. If the buyer cheats somehow, we can't see if the transaction happens or not.
if any issues,
The buyer can like hack or do something. Malicious activity.
Okay, this situation. Do you need a blockchain or not?
Yeah, right. Ma'am, what is the
And I'll
answer?
talk. I mean, look, I will not say any answer. You guys will find our answer. So that is the
No, yes,
thing.
ma'am.
Okay, this scenario. This scenario.
Ma'am, what is
So this is a honest client. This is a malicious server, and the task is that the honest client has sent the data and it has said that do a big computation, say multiply many millions of numbers, and the server will return a result. The server might or might not return the correct result. Do you need a blockchain?
That's what we need.
Because
You can't
The
trust
client
the
service
server.
will be honest.
Server
Malicious
cannot be
is
trusted.
not
Malicious is a server, hacker.
Okay, you need a blockchain. What will you write on the blockchain?
For the server to return the correct data which the honest client asked.
You can't write the data on the chain, ma'am. The request response sequence should be written on the blockchain.
Request response will be written on the blockchain. What is the request and what is the response here?
What are
The computation process, like key records on the input data should be written on the chain.
Okay.
and we can
So someone come and draw.
To prevent fraud and double spending.
Pardon?
To prevent fraud and double spending.
You will use a blockchain. What is a double spending attack in this case?
If we buying a thing from server, ma'am, which is malicious, we are paying to both the hacker and the server.
You have no payment, only the server.
You are not paying anything. The client simply says, I have 10 numbers, compute the sum of the 10 numbers.
And then instead of money, replace with the data.
Yeah, replace the data. Yeah, so what will you write on the blockchain?
Ma'am, does the client know that the server is malicious, ma'am? Does the client know?
Yes.
So they just ignore that.
What?
It's malicious, so why he's going?
So the thing is, that's a good point. This is a good point. Even no such malicious.
The point is, you know that the server has malicious intent.
Intent.
But you do not have other choice. You need a book to buy, right? From this malicious server. You know that Amazon only service provider here. You know Amazon can cheat, but still you will buy from Amazon, and still you need to protect your transactions, right? You need your book safely delivered to you at your address.
So the thing is that the server will have malicious. Server has malicious intent, but that does not mean that it will always be malicious.
Yes.
And you don't have much options also.
So we can that's why we are using blockchain. Like it is decentralized. We have more servers, so it decreases the probability of maliciousness.
Yeah, so do you want to install more or do you want to rely on different servers or what is your strategy here? Rick, please, hello. So we have one answer, so
yeah, we can have more servers and like the nodes, the people who are like these servers should be like they have more privacy and more transparent, so that it decreases the chance of malicious.
so essentially instead of one server you would have multiple servers.
Yeah.
And will you be querying, you will just send the query and get some response? How will you figure out, if you get 5 responses, how will you know which one is the right answer and which one is the wrong answer?
Doesn't the blockchain filter it out?
That's what I'm asking. Will you use a blockchain and how?
Yeah, just for that.
You should have validator in the blockchain.
Yeah. But what will a validator do? What will it
Validates
validate?
the answer, the correct answer.
How will it
Whether the
validate?
trustable person.
How will it validate?
Will it validate?
Okay, tell me in a situation, this sort of a situation where I have 100 numbers and I want to calculate the average. How would a blockchain validate? So what does the smart contract have?
We have a request from the management and the answer it will not that it will come or it will track the answer and swap
Okay.
or the more than
Okay, so one thing that you can do, you are essentially asking another,
Searching for
you can ask another party, be it a smart contract, be it a third party, to give all the numbers to them. They can add and give you the average. Maybe that's one thing. And you're writing it on you are doing it on a smart contract because this has been run by many nodes and you are able to get an answer. They can give you an answer which is correct, and then you will match with whatever the server has. Okay, so this is one approach. Can you do better? Can you do better? And I'm saying you can do it without a contract, without a blockchain.
Ma'am, this Oracle come under blockchain, no?
Okay, if you have an answer with an Oracle, tell me.
I thought we can use that because we can monitor with and verify with that. Also have the real world. I saw now in ChatGPT. Like I don't know what it does. That's why I saw.
I like your honesty.
Then the teachers would also use ChatGPT.
Um,
Yes, answer is
what was your question? What did you tell ChatGPT? Let me see. Let me hear.
Do we need a blockchain when you have a honest client and malicious server? I just wanted to guess. Yes, we do need to check the data integrity and
Dopamine.
That's why I don't use ChatGPT. Okay.
I will use it right?
Yeah, essentially that's what you are going to do. You are going to prove the server is going to not only compute, but it is going to give a proof that it has computed correctly. So I did not say how to write that proof, but that is how it is done. In that case, you don't have to write anything in the chain because the client is honest. It cannot change its
No,
question.
I think at the same time, client is not interested in how you are calculating the average,
Right.
but
It
you are
only wants the
interested to know actually it is the correct average.
Yeah.
That's all, and that is your proof. That is the proof will be provided by server, and
Yeah.
finally client will be convinced.
Yeah.
That's
So-
the case.
Yeah. So essentially, the server is going to simply give a proof that it has calculated everything correctly. And when I say proof, it's again that in the morning I was saying it has to be a snark proof. It is a non-interactive proof. So that is what a proof essentially does. So I just wanted to tell you that this sort of a proof is different from having a blockchain. And if your client is honest, you don't even have to bother. If the server can prove whatever it is doing is correct, that's all. And it needs a proof. The client only needs a proof. That's how it is designed.
but you say that it's a malicious server and can't be trusted.
But it cannot fake an answer. So, maybe as a
Yes.
yeah, so
So it is sound actually. If the proof is correct, it will be correct.
it will be correct.
Yes.
If the computation is correct, the proof will be correct.
This actually it will work. But for example, in the case the IoT application case, for example, I submit money.
Even if it is malicious,
I submit money and then I want to book something that I want to book. But it does not apply to me. How is this only applicable in the case when it has to provide data back? So what is the case? Instead of providing it does not provide data.
Yeah, so if it does not reply, then you can simply ignore and imagine that that person, you don't want to interact with that person.
This is the case of not blockchain. I am expecting data from the server and want to verify the data is correct. It is the only case
Right. So if you are expecting a proof and they are not giving you a proof, that itself shows that you don't have faith in that, and then you abort that connection.
Basically, when this blockchain key model, that will request a proof to be selected.
Right. Right. Okay, so good point. So not only for the client to be convinced, it will ask the server not only give me the result but also give me a proof of the correctness of the result. And this is what is always happening when you are doing the layer 2. Not only was it the operator was not only clubbing the transaction, it was saying my state has changed. It was giving a proof that the state has changed. What that proof is, we did not do. But why it is used, that's why it is used.
So
We'll see
one more assumption here is I think that server and client will run the protocol fairly.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That is also true. I mean, if they will not follow the protocol, then everything will fall down.
Yes. Okay, so this is one example. If one side is honest, then you don't. I mean, if one of the parties is honest, it's an honest server malicious client. Still, you need not have this. But when you do not have it, both the parties are dishonest, then you have to rely on a third party, honest party. You need to have at least one honest party in the system.
And how does the knowledge proof work in the second case when there is a malicious client?
In the case of malicious client, it will be something like the server essentially. Okay, how will it work in this malicious client setting? Anyone?
Sure.
Question is, in the malicious client setting,
Both are malicious now.
no, not both are malicious. One, the client is malicious, server is not malicious. So the problem is actually a little bit ill-defined in that case.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, so the same setting it will be reversed. So
Yeah.
client will provide the proof that I will not change my statement later.
Right.
I will stick to my statement which I committed earlier.
But the zero knowledge proof in
So
this case
so
is
that's
not
the proof. The proof will actually support that statement.
But
Right?
this is a statement. How a proof will record a statement?
Proof will come through server. Now I am saying server is honest. Server will give you correct answer. So anyway, there is the answer, but it is, as Madam said, it is ill-defined actually. So
Okay.
it's okay.
So the next one is this is what we talked about. So even before the okay, so this is something that we saw. This is not an honest client. This is a normal. I mean the normal setting. This is not the honest client setting. It is any client, any server setting. So you are doing blockchain. One of the purpose you are using blockchain is dispute resolution or accountability. Both parties are accountable. Maybe I'll just quickly change this because we'll make a mistake later. This is
So
another
ma'am,
client.
in this case, both are malicious. Now what you are discussing?
So this is something we already discussed. I just want to say that when you want to resolve a dispute, you will be using a blockchain. Because both the client and the server, they are both dishonest, and you want to resolve a dispute because, as I mentioned in the morning, you were transacting with another party, and you don't know who amongst this is honest. So you are going to the court to dispute a thing, right? So this is a blockchain, not very interesting cases, interesting structures. when you need dispute resolution. Because you are, in the dispute resolution, you are, committing to some evidences and you are showing that all these evidences are correct. So this is one example for where blockchains are required. For example, in the supply chain case.
So, madam, I have one question.
Yeah,
So probably, generally zero knowledge proof, basically I commit first, right? So there is a commitment.
Yeah, commitment.
But here my commitments are changing depending on the other party, dishonest party. That is why I am forced to use this blockchain.
No.
Because my commitments are keep updating every time.
No, commitment is not updated. Committing, you are initially committing.
Or statements are changing, huh?
Which statement?
That somebody is not delivered. Then
No, I'm not talking of that, all this complicated scenario. I'm just talking about, say, a computation and returning the result.
No,
So initially you have to commit to your data. That's what I'm saying.
okay.
Because if you later say that this is not the data I computed on, then it will be hard to justify, right? What is the data? What did you compute on?
No, what I was saying, like there will be multiple round of interaction between both the dishonest parties. So for that also we might require all the history from data to all the.
No, we don't need, because this is what the easiest way is that the client at the start of the protocol, it knows what data it wants to compute on, so it is going to commit that.
Right.
Okay. And then it is asking the server, and the server knows. I mean, this is what we discussed just before you came. So the server also agrees that this is the data that it has committed. Server can also see, right?
Right.
After this after everything has happened, after the server has computed, it is writing the proof, and this proof is matched with whatever has been committed in the first place.
Right.
Okay, so this is one example. Then, what other reason why you want to have have these blockchains is for provenance. Does anyone know what is the meaning of provenance?
To prove.
To prove. To prove what? So, for example, think of a scenario where you have some some exotic vegetables which are grown, and you want to figure out whether it has been grown in the farm and it has essentially gone through a process, and whatever you are eating is a real organic something, good food, good something, good product, produce. So you have the supply chain. So you want to figure out whether it has come from the right farm that they are claiming it to be, or it has been sourced responsibly. So that is provenance. It means that the origin of the data is, I have some way of showing that the origin of the data is what is claimed. So that's provenance. So that is also a case where you could have this in the supply chain management, scenario. This is also where you could keep blockchains. So, for example, if you were to use the supply chain management for provenance and tracking, could you tell me how you could use a blockchain? Say from farm to plate. I'm growing something in the farm. I'm not using any pesticide. I'm not using any fertilizers. I'm growing it very responsibly, and now I'm going to, take it, go to do all sorts of processing and all, and finally it is coming on my plate. I brought it from the market. Can you tell me if how you might use a blockchain in this case?
So the person wants to know at what time it was grown, at each time stamp what was done. So it can be recorded in a blockchain. This information can be provided to the user to help verify if the food is organic.
Fine.
But the person can falsify the records.
That is what the blockchain is.
Now,
like input, if the person's inputs the wrong data, then blockchain will record wrong data.
so how would you use blockchain or in this scenario, and what sort of tools would you use? Or some of you might tell me that no, I don't need a blockchain. That's also an answer.
We can integrate barcodes and QR codes.
Yeah, barcode and QR code where?
If it is an Apple, then each Apple will have a different code, and that code will be scanned. So you can actually track where the apple is. That cannot be falsified.
That cannot be possible then.
That cannot be falsified.
Falsified. So essentially you have a code associated with the product and you are reading it at every step and tracking the history of that or the movement of the product from the farm to the plate. And do you need a blockchain for this?
Each movement should be recorded.
What if I don't? What if I don't use a blockchain? I can just do it on a my register.
Maybe the honest product may be replaced by some false products by intermediators, middle actors.
So essentially, if you could forge some of these information, or not forge, but I would say manipulate this information. So maybe when you go back today, you are going for dinner anyway. So I mean, not much, but think that if you see a use case or if you see an application, first of all, whether to use it and how you would use this blockchain. So for example, similarly, I was talking about precious stones being mined and then you are getting it in the. So I was essentially showing from this Everledger project had this they were looking to diamonds and they were mining the diamonds to and then take it to different steps to finally make a jewelry.
Maybe like in when we order delivery, like in Amazon, we get timestamps. It delivered to this location. The one that is delivering the parcel, he has to verify each point by scanning some QR or something. It might be added to some blockchain so that data cannot be manipulated. Are these blockchains running at these systems or are they not?
Okay, good question. Are there blockchains like this? So yeah, just giving you an answer. There were not permissioned blockchains. Permissioned means what does permission mean?
Approved to public blockchain.
Yeah, is that?
Pardon? Only a few centralized.
Yeah, so essentially, yeah, it's like a an entity who is maintaining that blockchain. That not everyone can join or be a part of that blockchain. So earlier, I have seen a few companies who had their this permissioned blockchain. They did this sort of a thing.
Are these invoices that they take, are these documents recorded with the blockchains or are these still loose information? For example, the invoices we get on online deliveries or the timestamps.
So none of these online delivery use blockchain. So the blockchains applications, some of the applications I have seen in like big freight management and so on. And a number of these companies like IBM and many of them, they had like lot of these supply chain management projects or products.
Basically,
but I'm not
on the higher level. On, for example, diamond deliveries.
Yeah. Everledger was the one. Everledger has gone bankrupt. I mean, that was one of the examples.
So, ma'am, this is about CBDC currency. Every country is now having the CBDC, right? India has ERP. China has this digital yuan, right? European countries have the digital euro. And similarly, this e-ruble, I think, right? They all have this using this blockchain technology. It's a centralized e-rupee using or I have no idea.
CBDC, I know of a CBDC project that is using blockchain. I mean, there's one CBDC project that is being run in Australia. There are a number of banks are involved in that. That is like in a pilot stage. It's not being deployed or anything.
But in India, bank already introduced, like particularly I have account in Canara Bank. Canara Bank has this e-rupee.
Yeah, but are they using blockchain?
I have no idea. I'm just
That identity is not hidden.
Who is not hidden?
Identity. Like the government or the bank knows exactly what transactions you are doing.
It's pseudonymous.
Pseudonymous.
Basically,
Yeah.
at what
Are they using
blockchains?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Centralized blockchain they are using.
Centralized blockchain.
Yeah.
Okay. So it will come under permission blockchain again?
I think so. I mean, that will be maintained by all these banks.
Yes, only mainly RBI basically maintaining that.
Yeah, it is secure but not private, not pseudonymous.
Okay.
Yeah, so
but
one
there was also a concept, right, that the amount below 50,000 will not be will remain anonymous. The amount above 50,000 will be, you have to declare that to whom you are sending. I mean, they will not remain anonymous actually. This is I learned actually. I mean, I have read this, but I don't know how exactly they are doing these things. I mean, below 50,000 rupee they will remain anonymous.
Maybe they are running different blockchains for 50 above 50,000 and below 50,000.
How? But I am maintaining the same rupee, same chain, and then I am sending just 50,000 1 rupee. How they will make differentiation in between? I have a lot of questions in this answer. I don't know how. I actually don't know. I'm really
yeah, the
curious.
only thing is thing is that you have questions, which means that there's scope to or dig up something that's already there. But maybe you will not have enough documentation. I don't know. So the question that was asked is that we have any real application where blockchains are used. One of the places is NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So for example, you have different types of art, pieces of art that people want to really protect. So, they use these non-fungible tokens to tokenize those to keep in the blockchain. Then there are all this, the climate project I was talking about, that is also being done. Then there are a lot of these, what is it called? These land record management that a number of in India there were projects on land record management. So there are projects. So remittance is another one that has been, I've heard that it has been successfully deployed in many countries. So
But on grassroots level, it is not.
oh, there was another thing that I know. It was called Beef Ledger. They essentially tracked the movement of beef and from the farm to the plate. So that was also on blockchain. So there are some applications, and but largely it is a cryptocurrency application that has been most prominent in blockchains. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to say, wait a minute. Okay, so we have been talking about blockchain having storing all data and everything, and that essentially is transparency, but it essentially also violates the privacy requirements, right? So if your data, everything is written on chain, it violates privacy. Then what we do? What do we do? What would we do?
Now off-chain, you told about it.
I told?
I don't remember properly, but in off-chain we don't have the privacy problem, I think. Off-chain.
Off-chain.
What is off-chain?
That's I can't remember.
Again ChatGPT, right?
No, sir.
No, off-chain, I did teach them off-chain transactions. You know it. That's not happening on-chain. That's off-chain, right? Anything that's on, yeah, exactly, on the main.
It's on side chain, but it's not offline transaction.
When I say off-chain or on-chain, yeah, okay. So when I say on-chain or on-chain is always the main chain, okay? Off-chain is that's not happening on the main chain. So it's happening on, all these roll-ups is also a chain, right? It's also a blockchain. So it's actually, but not the main chain. Main chain is your, whatever you have in the layer 1, Ethereum or something, or other things. So one of the things I would like to mention here is that privacy is definitely very important in all these, IoT applications. And the way you have this enforced privacy is to either encrypt the data that you are storing on chain, and then it raises other questions. If I am If I have my data encrypted, then how will I compute on this data? So naturally, there are questions around how to do privacy preserving computation that can protect the privacy as well as give the transparency, because your transparency comes from the fact that you're able to prove the correctness of the information, right? So both the things can be achieved, can happen together, because this is something that people keep on asking me. You're saying everything is transparent, you are writing everything, what happens to the privacy? But it is coming together. It's not like one is disjoint from the other.
And in the context of cryptocurrencies, you mentioned on mixing.
Yeah.
Is this also a technique to more secure
anonymity of users, or anonymity of the users who are making the transactions? That can be protected through mixing, but it's not a foolproof thing. So in the morning, I think when we were talking of zero knowledge, so there is couple of currencies which are private, not private. I would say that all transactions are hidden, and one example is a Zcash. Zcash project essentially hides all the values that are being transacted. Who is transacting what, that is also not known. So that's a project. Many of the privacy related projects are also closed. Because of regulatory.
But everything will be available on the public ledger, right? In Zcash also.
Yeah.
But transaction will remain anonymous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically,
transaction
the
remains
amount
hidden.
is anonymous. The nonce and all values might be visible.
Everything is.
And who will maintain this public ledger?
Huh?
Who will maintain this public ledger?
Public ledger. Zcash is the public ledger.
Okay.
Zcash is a public ledger. Only that the values are not known. What are or who is making the transaction? That is also not known.
So how will the state maintain if we maintain some crypto-based models or Ethereum-based models?
Yeah, I think Zcash is on the UTL somewhere.
So how is the state maintained after each transaction? The transaction amount of each account is also cached.
Okay, maybe we can discuss this. Okay, so this we did. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to say before we close off for today is that so if you are essentially designing a blockchain, if you are designing an application, the first thing that you should keep in mind is that what are the requirements of this, and whether it at all needs a blockchain. Only because you are doing a course in blockchain does not mean whatever you see you try to put on chain, right? And also sometimes these blockchains can be quite expensive. So whether you would use a blockchain or you would use a centralized system, that's also a question. What sort of guarantees in terms of security you require is something also to keep in mind while you have a blockchain, while you are designing some application. So with that, tomorrow we are going to look into some IoT applications, and we'll see, in the morning I'm going to show you IoT application, but in the afternoon I'll give you a problem and you will work on it. Try to come up with your solution. Okay, so thank you, and I'll see you at dinner.
Thank you.